words into results. We're looking for the appointment of qualified and honest people, not only to the cabinet, but as deputy ministers, as governors, to other key positions around the country. We're very hopeful and we're encouraged by the progress that we're making, but we're not under any illusions that it will be easy. It's hard to tackle corruption. It was hard to tackle corruption in the United States. To any of you who've studied U.S. history, you will follow throughout the 1800s and early 1900s the long struggle to get a civil service law first put in place and to tackle corruption in the cities and political machines around the country. These things don't happen easily, but they are very important, and we're happy that we have this new commitment and agreement on a way ahead. We're also working not just at the national level, but at the provincial level, which is like the state level, and the district level of Afghanistan, which is akin somewhat to our counties, to try to build up the presence of the Afghan government and the effectiveness of it. In a number of places around the country, it's as if you think of where you grew up, if you think that there was maybe a police chief in your county, and that's it, nobody else. There was maybe an informal group of elders that got together and decided things in the community. Well, maybe there wasn't either. For many years during the Civil War and afterwards, the flow of war, the warlords, the changing federal governments, the insurgency eliminated the presence of local officials in many places. So in many parts of Afghanistan right now, there is not an organized presence of the central government. So we're working with the Afghans, with our military partners, with our coalition partners, to try to change that situation now, to build up local capacity, to recruit and bring in officials to take places that have been empty for years, that are supposed to be filled, but just haven't been filled at a local level. So the people at that level can really feel a connection to their government. You can imagine yourselves that back in your home city, there was really no presence, no government presence going on. You probably think, well, my family's really important and my neighbors are important, I know them, but you wouldn't have that connection with the government. Imagine growing up in that way, as many Afghans have in rural areas. That's the situation that needs to be corrected and needs to be addressed right now. There are a couple of programs like the National Solidarity Program, which is really one of the key successful programs the Afghans have undertaken. And they've gone around and at the village level in 22,000 villages across the country have set up community development councils, which is the first local government presence or local presence with a government connection that has existed in those communities for probably the memory of most of the residents of that community. And it's had a tremendous success with local people getting together, deciding on what needs to be fixed in that community. They're given some money. They contribute about 10% of the cost of those projects. They then decide what to do and how to manage it themselves. We're trying to build on successes like that to help create district councils, government presence that really is responsive and is seen as legitimate. We want to do this really pretty quickly. We don't want to be the ones that Afghans see as responsible for fixing their local problems. We want Afghan officials to have that responsibility. We could go into a lot of communities, drive in there with our vehicles and fix the bridge, dig the wells, and do those things, and we've done that in some places. But what we've learned is that that is not enough. There needs to be effective local governance that is tied to the Afghan population if this is going to work. What we are trying to do is train and prepare those Afghans. So we're going to train over 16,000 civil servants this year, over 10,000 health workers, and over 60,000 teachers. And we're hoping to do even more than that as we work through in the months ahead. Now that comes in a situation where some 50% of the Afghans are under the age of 18, 2/3 of Afghans are under the age of 30, and maternal health is among the worst in the world. So when we make these kind of investments, they are deeply appreciated by the Afghan population. I should say a couple words about opium poppies. You may have heard 93% of the world's opium currently comes from Afghanistan. It's a scourge that not only harms the rest of the world, but has terrible effects within Afghanistan as well. It generates funds for the insurgency. It feeds corruption throughout the country. It undermines the legal economy. And it's created within Afghanistan one of the highest addiction rates in the world. So our strategy for taking this on involves law enforcement agencies and the military, U.S., international, and Afghan working together to interdict drug shipments and detain major traffickers, and to support legitimate agricultural development as an alternative. Our DEA works closely with their Afghan partners to investigate and prosecute major drug kingpins. With the support of the United States and the United Kingdom, we've created a counter-narcotics justice task force that's become the most effective judicial organization in Afghanistan today. It has scores of successful investigations, prosecutions, and convictions of hundreds of drug traffickers. The State Department runs the biggest network of drug prevention and treatment clinics in Afghanistan, trying to reduce demand for narcotics and help Afghan addicts return to legal livelihoods and more normal lives. But we aren't going to be able to resolve the narcotics problem until we have created legitimate jobs in the Afghan economy. And to a large extent, as I mentioned earlier, that means fixing and strengthening the agricultural sector, because this is still a desperately poor, rural, and agrarian country. You've probably read, for those of you who regularly read the op-ed pieces, there are a number of skeptics who think that we're reaching too high. They say that Afghanistan has rarely in its long history had a central government capable of carrying out some of the tasks that I've mentioned, and that it's really unrealistic to expect that a coherent state is going to emerge in Afghanistan. This is just a waste of resources. However, we and our Afghan partners thinking we are concentrating on what is essential and attainable. While the Afghan state has never been particularly strong, Afghanistan has had a functioning governments in Kabul that were widely considered legitimate. Secondly, we have a number of examples around the country of very successful local and provincial governments. Third, what we're really talking about here are state structures with minimum capacities. The capacities that practically any state in the world needs to provide to serve its people. And finally, it's pretty clear from talking with Afghans and from polling that Afghans aren't against the expansion of a responsive government. They are against the expansion of a bad or predatory government. So what we're trying to do here is not nation building. And we're not trying to impose a Western model, but we are trying to help foment an Afghan version of government that provides basic services and meets those basic needs of their people. Now finally, as I said, we can get the security right, we can put a lot of effort into government, but if we don't get the broad development of the society and the economy moving along in sync with that, it won't be sustainable in the long run. Afghanistan needs to rebuild its legitimate economy and to be able to start to support itself. Therefore, the third pillar of what we're looking at